Digital currencies are similar to other currencies in that you're supposed to be able to spend them to purchase things or to make transfers to other people. Digital currencies, kind of what defines them is that they exist exclusively in a digital format and are transacted in a digital format. So compared to other currencies like the dollar, the euro, government-backed currencies, these typically exist both in a digital format and they also typically have a hard asset format as well, cash, coins, things like that. And so while technically, yes, traditional currencies do have digital formats, banks have, they don't have a physical representation of every dollar that they have on their books. But we typically aren't talking about government-backed currencies when we mention digital currencies. Because digital currencies are often not issued by governments, almost always not issued by governments, and they exist only online. I guess there could be outliers where they had a physical copy also, but that's really not the norm for digital currencies. In terms of how digital currencies work, it really depends on which digital currency you're talking about. A lot of them can function very similar to a government-backed security. A lot of them can function back to the way that the US used to do its dollar. It used to be based on the gold system, but it's not anymore. And digital currencies can go either way as well. So we've had digital currencies that are and have been based on commodities like gold. So there was a digital currency called e-gold. And so when you could purchase this currency with $1 and you were essentially purchasing a digital currency that was backed by gold. So theoretically, that's where its value came from. But there are also digital currencies that float based on the value that people are willing to pay for them. And so Bitcoin would be a good example of that because it's not backed by any specific commodity. There's no equal ratio between how many Bitcoins are related to $1. A Bitcoin is essentially worth what people are willing to pay for it. So the dollar is kind of like that too. Of course, people wonder, well, the dollar is backed up by government. That's where part of its value comes from. Bitcoin, obviously, no one can make you accept Bitcoins as a form of payment. It's a totally voluntary system. Yet they are finite, so people see value in them. Kind of like gold, right? Because gold is a good for currency, or at least it used to be, because it was durable. These bars of gold aren't going to rust, and also it was finite, so you couldn't just continuously print more gold. Like that, Bitcoin is also finite, and it's also pretty durable. It's very hard to destroy them or to counterfeit them. One of the recent developments in digital currencies is the decentralized system of creating the currency. And so digital currencies have been around for a while. In the past, they were mostly centralized systems, which meant that whoever issued the currency, the creator, was normally a private organization run by a few people, maybe even one person. And so they created this system and they managed all the transactions. They kind of served as the processor for all these transactions that were submitted digitally. But a decentralized system doesn't work that way. Instead, it uses a peer-to-peer network of all of its users. And so kind of like Napster was one of the first famous peer-to-peer networks. Well, Bitcoin is a little bit similar to that in that there's no central server or computer that takes all the transactions. Instead, the Bitcoin network exists because a bunch of users all around the world have their computers running this program that processes all these transactions. And so digital currencies really weren't that popular until Bitcoin was invented. And so that really got things going because one of the problems for digital currencies to exist was that they were failing to meet regulatory guidelines. Liberty Reserve and e-gold are good examples of digital currencies from the past that were centralized and they were not following anti-money laundering regulations. And so governments around the world, including the US government, shut these private currencies down. And they were able to find who was running them and they made them stop basically. And so those kind of dried up. But Bitcoin, it's very difficult to regulate it in that sense because these people are all around the world. Even if you went after one person who was running the Bitcoin software on their computer, there would still be thousands of other people doing it as well. So to really get rid of Bitcoin, law enforcement would have to shut all these people down, and it's not feasible to do that. And so these decentralized currencies kind of evolved and originally attracted a lot of people who we're seeking to escape regulation. And so regulation has kind of had to catch up to those and develop in different ways to regulate the transactions rather than just the parties who are engaging in the transactions. It's difficult to regulate a transaction on the individual level. So if one individual sends Bitcoins or another similar currency to someone using this decentralized system, that is hard to regulate. What is possible to regulate is when a third party is providing some sort of service for multiple people using Bitcoin. So the most common example would be a currency exchange. And so when people buy Bitcoins, often the way that the easiest way to get Bitcoins is to go through one of these currency exchanges and say, I'm going to pay you $100 for X amount of Bitcoin or €100 for X amount of Bitcoin, and they will exchange it for that. And so they're providing a service which is essentially a financial service. These are financial institutions, but they're kind of a new kind of financial institution. And so that's really where regulation can take hold, because these parties are easier to find. We generally know who's operating them, or at least we know how to find out. And so that's where the regulation is. That's the place where the future of regulation will be.